Hey everyone, this is Derek Plavin and welcome to episode 2. Now, in the highly unlikely event that this happens to be the first video that you've ever seen on this channel before, I would suggest that you still go back to the beginning and start at episode 1 and go in order because that's really how you're going to get the most out of this channel. Now, this video in particular today is probably the only one that I can think of for now on the channel that I can comfortably say that if you've been playing guitar for at least a little while and you feel relatively acquainted on the instrument, you'd probably be just fine to go on right over to episode 3. Because really all I'm going to talk about today is just some of the things I think you should know before going forward with my videos. Alright? And a lot of this stuff is really just the basics, guitar fundamentals and whatnot, as well as just music fundamentals. Now, I will say that if you are a beginner and you're interested in learning jazz guitar and you found my channel and you're interested in hearing what I have to say, I'm flattered and I really appreciate that. But, you really want to keep some things in mind if you really want to get the most out of me. First of all, jazz music is a music specifically where one of the things that we could appreciate about it is how it is being played. This isn't a live, spontaneous art, even if it's being captured on recording. This is really different, in my opinion, from, say, the composition of someone like Beethoven. Just the mere fact that he could compose such grand masterpieces of work is enough to be appreciated. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great classical musicians who are indeed great instrumentalists and great players, and even Beethoven I'm sure was a great player, but unless you're a classical music aficionado and are really familiar with certain recordings of some of these works, it's like you can listen to some of your favorite classical compositions by these composers and maybe not even know one musician who's playing in that symphony. Now this is very different from, say, listening to a Coltrane record with this classic quartet where, if you're a fan, you know all the musicians on that record, you know how they all sound and what they're doing, and you're listening to them individually as well as a collective sound and appreciating all of that. So really what I'm getting at here is that you could say that all great jazz musicians are pretty much universally great players. They could still be great composers and other things as well, but in order to truly be a great jazz musician, you need to be a great player. Therefore, I would say that some degree on your instrument is pretty necessary if you really want to be able to pull this music off effectively. Now, interestingly enough though, you don't actually need to have any experience playing jazz before watching my videos. I want you to understand that with my method, I'm really more about the approach and how we take all the material that we like and put it into practice with this specific kind of routine or way of working through it all. So, if you have a good approach from day one and you work at this stuff consistently, the only place you have to go is up from the beginning. So if there's anything on this list that I'm about to get into that you honestly feel like you don't understand well enough, probably be wise to educate yourself on it, or just figure out what you need to know. And again, this isn't like a super strict thing where you need to know all this stuff perfectly, but you just want to have a general sense of what fundamentals you should really be familiar with before going forward. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm also available for lessons obviously as well too. So with all that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the things I think you should know before going ahead and watching my videos. You want to feel relatively acquainted on the guitar as far as bassline technique is concerned, and that has to do with your right and left hand coordination, and you should be relatively, acquainted or comfortable with either alternate picking, economy picking, sweep picking, or legato with ham-runs or pull-ups, or some sort of combination of all of those. You gotta have some facility on your instrument, at least to start. You don't need to be the greatest technician yet, but you gotta have some facility. You should know the names of the notes on the entire fretboard. If you're familiar with most, but not all, make sure you know how to figure out what you need to know. You want to know your basic open position guitar chords. These are the beginner guitar chords that every guitar player learns. I tend to think that there's 12 main beginner guitar chords. I might put up a chart, there might be some extra ones in there, but I tend to think of the E major minor dominant 7, same thing with the A major minor dominant, D major minor dominant, and then you got your 3, C major, F major, and G major. To me, those are the first 12 chords that all guitar players should learn. You want to be familiar with their 6 basic movable bar chord shapes, that are the root position shapes, that are derived from the 3 E shapes and the 3 A shapes. So your E major minor dominant, A major minor dominant, turning them into the movable bar chord shapes and being able to put them at any fret or position or key and know how to play these basic chords in any key. You want to know your stock 7th chords, starting on the low E string and A string and root position chords. That would be major 7, minor 7, dominant 7, minor 7 flat 5 or half diminished, and fully diminished 7. Just root position for now when I'm talking about these. Now keep in mind that the stock chords that are learned from the A string, usually those are the drop 2 voicings, and we're going to talk about those again in a second. The voicings that are derived from the low E string, typically, those are the drop 2, 3 voicings. You don't need to know all that right now. You know, when you learn more, you could figure all that out. But I think, you know, you just want to be familiar with the stock shapes of the 7 chords. You also want to be familiar with other various kinds of 7 chords, like minor major 7, maybe dominant 7 suspended, or major 7 augmented. You also want to know other types of 6 chords, or 9, or add 9, 6/9 chords, different kinds of diminished and augmented chords, or really just all these different kinds of chords with various unaltered and altered extensions. And what I'm referring to when I'm talking about these chords are really just primarily stock voicings and shapes that, you know, a lot of guitar players are all familiar with. Any chord or harmony, like a major 7 for example, could have conventional voicings as well as unconventional voicings. So it's not necessarily about knowing all these obscure or advanced harmonies as much as it's just being familiar with some of the stock shapes. And you know, if you're watching my videos, you're probably at least already a little bit familiar as far as what's more common and what's not. You want to know your triad shapes, all inversions all over the instrument. And these would include shapes that are more conducive to, say, arpeggios, like in a more melodic case, or more chordal types of shapes that you might play these harmonies as. And for both of them, you know, it's important to consider closed position triads and open position triads, and know all this stuff and how to play them in all the keys and all that. Okay, so back to drop 2. So you want to know with drop 2, at least to start, because drop 2 voicings are very commonly used in jazz. You want to know all the inversions of all the typical 7 chords with your drop 2 voicings, and it's okay if you only know them on the A string now, or the lowest note song on the A string, but eventually you're going to want to know how to take these voicings and move them across string sets so that you can play them on different string sets. And that would apply to other voicings as well, but for now, just make sure you know your drop 2 voicings. You want to know the pentatonic / blues scale, all 5 positions, being able to play in any position or key. You want to know the 12-bar blues form, and also understand 1, 4, 5 in a key and how those things go together. And, you know, for now, if you just know the basic 12-bar blues progression, that's totally okay. If you know a jazz blues, it's even better. You know, any other harmonic variations of what you might be able to do on a blues, it's even better. Alright, now you want to know the major scale in all keys and positions. Now for this, I'm going to point out that for my channel and method, I'm primarily going to be using the Cage system of fingerings, which are the 5 fingerings of the major scale, in order to, you know, basically systemize the layout of the guitar in different keys. The only other, like, real system, in my opinion, that maybe exists in contrast to that one would be more of like a modal system if you have 7 different fingerings, each one derived off of each degree of the major scale. Now, the major scale is 7 notes. The Cage system only has 5 fingerings. With the modal fingerings, in my opinion, 5 of those 7 are basically like the same as the 5 Cage fingerings anyway, so you really just have some extra ones. But those extra ones aren't really that much used in my method. It's still good to know. And I'm rambling about the Cage system now, but we're gonna get more into that in other videos. And in my opinion, the Cage system has a very, very important significance as far as organizing your practice and knowing how to work through certain types of material. Alright, you want to know your different arpeggio shapes for various kinds of 7th chords. Now, if you feel like you're lacking in proficiency with these of any kind, practice what you need, but really what's most important is you just want to know how to find these shapes, okay? Basically, you need to know how to find the notes of any given harmony anywhere on your guitar neck if you needed to. You know, you shouldn't be confused about, you know, what notes are in a E flat minor 7 chord, for example, and where they are on the guitar. Alright, you want to have at least a basic classroom level understanding of rhythm. You want to understand time signatures. You want to understand different subdivisions and how they sound or feel or relate to a beat. You want to be able to dictate at least a simple rhythm to paper and write it out properly if you were to hear it. Okay, now as far as rhythm goes, there's going to be whole sections of videos on this channel that are devoted to different, various rhythmic concepts, because it's important when it comes to jazz music. So if you feel like you're lacking at all in anything having to do with rhythm, don't worry, we're going to be talking about it a lot on this channel. Now, as far as harmony or theory is concerned, you really just want to know the meat and potatoes of basically what you would need to know for all the music that exists, out there, or the majority of music, even just simple pop music, okay? So this would include things like understanding how to read music notation, intervals, major scales, relative major and minor. You want to know your diatonic chord scales with your triads as well as the seventh chords. You want to know your different arpeggio or chord formulas for the various triads and seventh chords. You want to be familiar with the circle of fifths or fourths as you see it. And you want to know what mode is built off of each degree of the major scale, at least to start, and what are the mode's corresponding intervals and tonalities that go along with it. Now, again, if you have experience, you should be familiar with all that stuff, and it shouldn't really be that intimidating, but I can summarize all of that theory basically to this figure right here. This is just a general outline. Now, I also want to address a couple of bonus things. These aren't things that I think you have to know before my channel, but these are things that are, at least most of them, more specifically conducive to jazz, so it's not going to hurt at all to already be familiar with these different concepts. So I'm talking about things like tritone substitution, secondary dominant chords. You want to be familiar with certain types of chords such as the minor 4 or the flat 7/7, which is like the same chord. I would put these chords in a category of what you may label as common non-diatonic chords that are still functional within a key. So it's a chord that isn't traditionally diatonic or related to that original key, but it has a very real and legitimate function in that key. Another one would be like the 2/7, which is like a secondary dominant chord as well. Alright, it'd be a good idea to know a little bit about the melodic minor scale and maybe even the harmonic minor or harmonic major also. Now, in order to play jazz effectively and professionally, you don't need to know any of these scales, but obviously, they can open up your harmonic, palette and possibilities of different sounds that you can use, so it can't hurt to learn these things, and, of the three, melodic minor is the most common of the three that's used in jazz. Okay, it'd be a good idea to know a little bit about chordal voicings, think McCoy Tyner, and it'd be a good idea to be familiar with different kinds of passing diminished chords or the diminished scales that are associated with them. Think Barry Harris. In fact, anything that you learn from Barry Harris is good. So yeah, so that's about it. So like I said, most of you guys will probably have no problem with that list at all, and I hope that it's not too intimidating for some of you guys. Obviously, don't feel threatened if there's anything on this list that you don't feel like you know too well. I'm certainly not perfect in all this, but you just want to make sure you're aware of what you need to do to progress. And I'm sure most of you guys realize that this is just the basic nuts and bolts of guitar/music fundamentals anyway. Now, the only other prerequisite that I would say to this channel is that you have a true understanding that if you really want to get results and progress, nothing that I say is going to matter if you don't put in the consistent work. I called this channel How to Practice Jazz Guitar Efficiently. I'm here to make it easier for you. I think I can help by eliminating a lot of the confusion in terms of what exactly to work on, because there's infinite things that you can work on, so I'm basically telling you what to work on, but if you want those results, you got to put in the work. So please keep this in mind. Don't waste your own time with this. I think I have a lot of great information to offer you guys, so you may as well put it into practice and try it out. So that's all for now. Like I said, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, or if you're interested in lessons or you want to learn some of these things also, please reach out. And yeah, I'm glad I got this episode done, because this one is the most boring to me. So now that we're done with this, now we can finally get into it and start talking about some cool things. So I will see you in episode 3.
Swinging and playing the blues. That's what we about.